Lisa Daly and Lori Goodwin are the Recovering Preacher's Kids. Sit back and relax as they have an unfiltered conversation. Because let's face it, somebody's just got to say it. Well, welcome back to the Recovering Preacher's Kids podcast. It is the first time ever that we are in the same location. Like, I can touch her. We usually record the podcast. She's at her house. I'm at my house, which is, I don't know. It's miles.
It's 2.5 hours away.
2.5 hours away. So that she came up, and so we thought, what fun it would be to record one for us live in person. And we jokingly have laughed about, well, what about headphones? How are we going to make that work? And then we realized we don't need headphones because we can hear each other because we're together. We can hear. God gave us ears. And so it's so funny, the topic that we decided to discuss, being an adult with issues like, I don't even want to say issues. That's not the right word. Struggles, because it's obvious Lori has issues. That's not up for debate. But, to be an adult that has struggles with OCD or ADHD or ADD or, autism or whatever, it's almost like a thorn in your side. That's the only way I could really describe it. I personally struggle with ADHD. I always thought that meant that like you were bouncing off the walls. That is not the case. The way ADHD affects me is I'm hyper focused on something. So at any given moment, I have about 478 tabs open in my brain, and they're all thinking at the same time. And if I shared with y'all what my brain sounded like, you would be afraid. And so I'm not going to do that. But what happens is one of those tabs clicks. And when it clicks, we cannot move on. So for instance, say I have a flat tire. Well, immediately I'm going to die. I have decided that flat tire means death. And so for days, I'm thinking about, Lori, you had a flat tire yesterday. What if you have a flat tire today? What if you have a flat tire next week? What if you have a flat tire a month from now? Every single time you're going to die. Like, I guess I'm a cat. I got 9 lives. I'm just going to continually die over a flat tire. And so I get hyper focused on this, and it's like, I can't move on. And so I told Lisa, I said, well, I need to tell y'all too, my husband has OCD, so we're quite the pair. And, so I told Lisa, I was like, let's do a podcast about what it's like to live with these things, OCD, ADHD, all that. And so in typical fashion, I was like, it's a huge thorn in my side. And so I bring the trauma and the issue, and Lisa does some research, and we're talking about it, and she starts laying out really what that means. And I was telling her, I said, well, I don't want to do this podcast anymore because I don't like that.
And then I freaked out because I'm like, that goes against the whole plan that we had talked about. And I'm hyperventilating because I don't know what we're going to talk about.
Right?
So that's my issue.
Because the whole thing is, y'all have to understand, God gives us these topics and we think they're going to go one way. And every single time we research and dive into what does God say about this topic or what does God say about that, it is never
what we want.
Never.
So
explain to us why I'm so frustrated in this moment. Explain to everybody what my problem is, what you learned in your research about a thorn in your side.
Okay. So just bear with me because I'm going to do a little reading because I can't do Tony Evans justice in doing this. So I looked up where Lori was talking about, where Paul was talking about a thorn in his flesh, which is in 2 Corinthians 12. And I started reading verse 1 and we get to 6 and down to 7. And, it reads, therefore, in order to keep me from becoming conceited, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger from Satan to torment me.
Stop. That's where I got uncomfortable. I've never thought about that.
No, Well, I mean, I've always just said, oh, God gives us a thorn in the flesh. Paul is a thorn in his flesh. If Paul can deal with his thorn in the flesh, let's just, we just need to learn to deal with it and accept it and go on. Then I read that. Well, then I go and I say, okay, well, let's read about that a little bit more. So I find a Tony Evans Study Bible where he says, in this context, a thorn is something or someone that painfully nags or irritates one's humanity on a continuous basis. Okay, so then we keep going down a little bit. And I guess first he talks about, Paul says it was clearly painful. So, I mean, your ADHD is painful to you, right? And it brought him much torment. The second one was, though God was the ultimate source of the thorn, Satan served as the delivery system.
I don't like that.
Just like Job, God allowed Job to suffer, where Satan, which I like the way he brought it, where Satan wants to torment us and bring us, I guess, shame. God wants to bring it to our good.
For our good.
For our good. And that's what his purpose is. And then the third one was, God's intention was that Paul not exalt himself as a result of his astonishing experiences. The Lord wanted to keep Paul humble because removing his self-sufficiency would eliminate any stubborn pride, make him more usable, cause him to bear more fruit in ministry, and bring more glory to God.
So are we understanding now why I'm completely upset and frustrated at the recording of this podcast? Because that's not where I wanted to go. That's not where I wanted to go. I've never thought, and I just used ADHD as an example.
Yeah.
The thorns are many.
Yeah.
Let's just say it this way. I am like a rose stem. There are just thorns all the way down that bad boy. And it's some of them that I have created. Some might be a person. Some might be other things.
Yeah.
But it's like I've never thought that God allows those things in my life for a purpose.
Yeah. I've always just looked at it as, okay, well, this is what I struggle with, so I'm just going to have to learn to deal with it. Not like he's using it to
grow me,
it make me humble, use it for my good. I mean, I struggle with, well, I don't know. I'm a little perfectionist.
No.
I'm a little perfectionist. I mean, we talk about, she jokes with me all the time about it because, I mean, I'm the one that she's flies by the seat of her pants. And that just like literally gives me heart palpitations when we get started. And I don't know where we're going with this podcast. Then I kind of struggle. So I have to have a plan. So I guess that's my thorn. So when you come in, I was like, we're just going to wing it. I kind of.
Because the reason I told her, I said, we're going to have to wing it is because y'all have to understand, like, this is one of the first times that I've ever stopped and thought about the thorns in my flesh being for my good.
Yeah.
When my kids were little, I have zero portion control when it comes to food. I mean, I'm working on it. It's a work in progress. But I was determined that my children were not going to struggle with the same thing. And so recently my kids were together and there were cookies, and my daughter went and got 4 cookies and my son went and got 4 cookies. Now I want you to understand they are 32 and 28. Okay. And then after they each ate their 4 cookies, they went back and got 4 more cookies. And my daughter's husband was like, why didn't you just get 8 cookies? And she said, oh, you're only allowed to get 4. And it was because growing up, I only would give them 4 cookies at a time. They could always have more cookies, but they just never allowed to sit down with like a whole thing of cookies, which I find humorous that I tried to teach my children something that I legit like I tried to teach them opposite of what I struggle with. But through the whole process, as I have been thinking about a thorn in my side, I've been thinking about, wait a minute, is it for your good? And I know it's silly doing it with cookies, but I think about all the things that God gives me, and then I take all of it instead of just taking the 4. So as I'm becoming older, I'm beginning to realize that my whole life, God, He blesses me, and I'm so thankful for that. But because that tab clicks,
Yeah.
I'm all in.
Yeah.
I'm sold. I'm all in. And instead of allowing God to slowly do the work in me, I consume it at 100%, which is not always what God intended. And so the very blessing becomes a thorn in my side because now I can't control it. I can't, do all the things I want to do with it. And so I'm finding that, I don't know, sitting here talking to you as we talked before we started recording, and now a good 98% of my thorns are self created. And I have to give that 2% because of the ADHD. God gave me that. That makes me unique, and I'm not going to let that one go. But I think about issues I have with people, and I think about, physical issues, it's self created.
Yeah.
I've created, and I'm not trying to be one of those people who's trying to be self shameful and, put myself down. I don't mean it that way, but it's like a huge revelation for me that, hey, guess what, Lori? Some of this
It's truly not a thorn that God has placed in your life. I guess that's what you're getting at.
Right.
This is not where Paul was saying that God has given us in order to keep him humble so that he is, I don't want to say productive for the kingdom, but keep his humility in check, his pride in check. Basically what you're saying, where we've always just jokingly, well, that's just a thorn in my flesh. I just got to suffer like Paul did, was really
right.
So we did it ourselves. We've created these and they're really not
thorns. And when you brought up the whole thing about Satan, that was like the light bulb for me, because I was like, because he's a mimicker. He can't create anything, but he can mimic everything.
Yeah.
And I see how Satan has taken situations in my life and mimicked it to the point that I legit was thinking, that's a thorn in my side. That's just something I'm going to have to overcome and work through. And I'm just like, wow.
Yeah. I hadn't really thought about it like that. And and some of the things I think that we consider thorns is just based from growing up, situations, traumas, relationships that didn't work out, created, well, I know for me, this need to control everything. And my counselor asked me the other day, she's like, well, why do you have to do that? I'm like, well, I just have to I have to control. As long as everything is controlled, I know everything's going to be okay. And, she kept pulling. And basically it came down, it was my security.
Oh.
If I knew everything was if I had it all planned out, of course, then we discussed, I have to think of everything that could go wrong. And then what I would do if it would go wrong. So that when it didn't go wrong, I can say, see, I was prepared, and see, it didn't go wrong.
Interesting.
But that's from basically what we're talking about. That's really not a thorn in my side. That's a created, I guess, self-soothing for me, because I'm going to tell you everything. Well, okay, we're going to die. That's your version. The sky's going to fall and everything's going to go wrong for me.
Right. So therefore, you chalk it up to, well, that's just a thorn in my side, something I have to live with, when it's a self-created situation.
Yeah.
Isn't it interesting that we get ourselves so tripped up on things, and instead of taking accountability for it, we go to scripture to try to justify it?
Do that all the time.
It's like, okay, God, oh, so Paul had a thorn in his side. This is a thorn in my side too. Oh, that's what this is. Instead of taking the time to seek God's face and just be like, okay, God, what is this?
What happened?
What is happening in my life right now?
Because if you read the scriptures above that, which I know they were always there, why did I bypass them? He was talking about someone else who been called up in the third heaven. So he was talking about someone else's vision, I'm assuming. So it was almost like when I was reading Tony's study Bible about that, he was like, he didn't want to take credit for it. So that's when he was like, well, God uses this to keep me in check. So I don't oh, look at what I'm doing over here.
Oh,
Look at me. Look, I can't off the top of my head. Oh, he was a missionary. So I went here, there, and everywhere and led all these churches. Look what I did. And that's what, he was basically saying, this kind of keeps me in check. But it's not the same thing as me saying I got to control everything. That's my thorn. Because
right.
that's not what.
Because that's not keeping you in check with the Lord.
Right.
That's not keeping you in line with God's plan for your life.
Right.
And that's where I'm going to tell you, I have honestly looked at ADHD like a thorn in my side. Because I was like, well, that's the way God made me. And maybe God does use that in a way to keep me in check. But at the same time, as I sit here and think, wow, there's other things that happen in my life that I feel like God uses to keep me in check. And I've almost looked at them. I've tried to manipulate and control those things. You see what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah.
So it's like, I feel like I've completely had it flip flopped. I've just my whole life just had them switched.
Okay.
That instead of recognizing the things God brings in my life to be truly thorns because he wants to humble me, he wants to keep me in check, he's wanting to make sure I'm staying on the right path, I've chosen to manipulate and control those things and then lie to myself that all these other things are the thorns in my side because I can't manipulate and control them.
Interesting.
Am I making sense what I'm saying?
Yeah, you are. Because it's like when there is a situation that I have the tendency to try to fix it and control it and get rid of it and solve the problem. And sometimes there is no humanly solving the problem. I'm supposed to go to, let God use it. But yeah, I don't do that.
Well, no, because then see what I do instead of going to God and asking for him to help me. See, then I'm just gonna be like, oh, that's just a thorn in my flesh. That just is what it is. That person's just gonna rub me wrong. That's just there's nothing we can do about that. So we're just gonna chalk it up.
Instead of saying, well, what was it that made you rub the wrong way? That might be a situation. Am I not as patient? This person is just a little needy. I don't have enough patience. So that's why they rub me the wrong way.
Because then I go back to as iron sharpens iron. That's not, that person as iron sharpens iron is not a thorn in your side, but yet at the same time it is because God's bringing that to us to humble us, correct us, change us. But I don't want nobody sharpening me. I don't want somebody telling me I'm wrong.
Well, I don't think any of us want.
Yeah. So, but isn't that what we're called to do? Aren't we called to lovingly tell someone when they're wrong? But I don't want to hear it.
But I think probably some of the problem is we like to say, well, you need to change 1, 2, and 3 without really looking at ourselves, which is what I think Paul is saying. That thorn is there for him because he has to, before he can say, you need to change this. He knows
you got to change yourself.
He knows what he's dealing with. And I can tell you this because I'm dealing with this.
How many times do we get advice from someone? Let me start over. Countless times I will share a struggle with someone wanting a certain type of advice from them.
Yes.
And then they speak truth to me and I become angry because that's not what I want to hear.
Oh yeah, it happens all the time.
And so then you start seeking out people who are going to be yes girls.
Yes.
And they're going to tell you exactly what you want to hear. And I thought about that as I was reading and studying too, was that I felt like Paul wasn't looking for a yes man because he knew God was the yes man. And if God wasn't saying that was right, then Paul was willing to say it was wrong. If God says it's wrong, it's wrong. But how many times do I take something that's wrong and then I try to control it, craft it, create it, spin it, do all these things?
I do it every day because I don't want anybody to think less of me.
See?
And say, oh, well, you're the preacher's kid. You're supposed to have it all together.
Right.
And then see, you really find out I really don't have it all together. So
it's almost like I think we put a mask on and then we act like we're this one person. And then when someone sees behind the mask, then it's like you want to backpedal almost.
Yeah.
And be like, oh, well, that's just a problem that I have, or that's the struggle that I have. It's almost like I'm realizing I've not been calling sin sin. Let me just get honest. That's the bottom line is I've tried to justify my sin by saying that's a thorn in my side.
Instead of really looking at what is a thorn in your flesh. What is it that God's given you that's there to shape you, not just the fact that, oh, I struggle with attention, or okay, well, why do you struggle with it?
Right, to start going down, like start pulling the onion layers apart and really start going down the rabbit hole of why do I feel that way?
And why do you why do you think, okay, this happened, so you're going to die?
Or I could even take it here, I'll just be quite honest with you. I can be quite cynical. So if you had the flu and I thought you should be over it because, WebMD told me you should be over it by now, and you still were struggling, I can often find myself cynical and be like, she is such a drama queen. It's just the flu. Okay, so, but what I'm seeing now is that's me. That's a sin because I'm judging someone. I don't know your help. I don't know why you're struggling with something longer. So, and that's just a small analogy, but what I realize is that's still sin, because as you start breaking it down, that being cynical, well, for me, goes back to being judgy. And while that's not a thorn in my side, but am I making sense?
But you take it and want to say that's what it is.
Right.
So where we started with this, because we wanted to be honest with our struggles, which everybody has struggles.
Yes.
Everybody deals with either ADD, ADHD, or OCD, or control situations, or like you say, I don't know, whatever it is.
Yeah, fill in
the blank. We all do, and I don't want to minimize that because those are true struggles. But we do need to take a step back and see whether or not, instead of just automatically labeling it as a thorn that God gave us, really looking at, is it something that we've done? Because I think it's a mixture. I really do. I think there's a mixture, because for me, being the OCD, want to have the plan, want to know which we're going, I don't want to mess up, I want to do this right, I think is in some ways can be a thorn, because that is a concern for me, to keep me hungry, because I don't want to be the, so I think there's part of it, but then it's also where I think where we add to it, where Satan talks to, that's what he's talking about, was the messenger. Satan was the messenger to Paul, to where he then says, well, you need to really worry about this and keep Lori on track and have her study the same thing you're studying, so you know exactly what she's going to say, because you don't want to say something you're not supposed to say, because you're going to screw up and someone's going to, but isn't he quite the deceiver? Because that's exactly what he did with Eve, is he added, did God really say? So the whole thing is like he just keeps adding, and that's how I think we get, or I can't speak for anybody. That's how I get so caught up in when the tab opens and it's just stuck there, and we're hyper focused on whatever that is then what I'm seeing is Satan starts adding to. He starts talking and he starts adding, and then brings your anxiety levels up. Yes. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And so instead of it keeping me humble, and instead of it keeping me in check, I become fearful. I become frustrated. I become anxious. I become
angry. I become all these things, which then causes me to feel guilt and shame and regret. None of that is from God. So none of that is drawing me closer to God. It's pulling me away from Him.
Which is not what Paul was saying.
No.
His thorn. Oh, goodness.
So
I don't know. Have we made a connection for you? Because I feel like
I'm just a complete mess at this point. I'm like the muddy puddle that your kids jump in, because I just have the realization that I've had it all wrong.
Yeah.
And I truly believe God gives us
Yes.
thorns in our side. He gives us things to further the kingdom. The Bible tells us
Paul says that.
Yeah.
Right.
So I'm not saying everything I struggle with, I'm the one that created
Right.
it. But my problem is I've not spent enough time with the Lord dissecting them all to figure out what is God using in my life to mold me and sharpen me, and what have I created in my own mind that I'm using that as an excuse. I'm using the thorn in my side as an excuse.
That makes sense. So it comes back to us spending time with our Father, talking about these tabs that are open, or whatever struggles you have, whatever things that are bothering you, and spend the time for Him to say, no, you created that one. Or, yes, I've placed that there to teach you a lesson. So so you can start, like, okay, the rose, you clip off the thorns. And now I leave a few or whatever. Because now you can just look at them as being beautiful to be there.
Yeah.
But still, I don't know, there to teach you a lesson. And I don't like to be taught lessons. I'm sorry.
I don't either.
I just don't.
It's one of those things I can remember when my kids were teenagers and they would be heartbroken, and I would be like, why can't I be like one of those TV moms and just have all the answers,
Right.
and like in 30 minutes wrap up my kid's problem and everything be okay. And sometimes I look at God that way. Why can't I just run to God and in 30 minutes, like, the problem is solved?
Right. Just here's the bow.
Yeah. And that's not the way God works. And He's showing me every day that He doesn't work that way. And I've got to accept that some of these things are going to take time, because I'm not mature enough to handle, hey, Lori, you created that one on your own, because I'm a tad rebellious. And so if you tell me not to step in a water puddle, we just might be stepping in a water puddle. And God knows that about me.
Yeah.
And so it's like, Lori, you're not mature enough to hear what I want to say. And so I'm very convicted by this episode. I'm very disappointed in myself that I once again had this plan and this purpose. And God, I'm beginning to think this podcast is my therapy, because every time we record, I walk away like, wow.
Yeah, that's not what I was expecting from this conversation.
No.
See, it goes back to the fact that, you can plan, but God really directs the path. Just what is that in Proverbs?
I think so.
Really, we think we have it together, but He's showing us we really don't. He's got the direction.
Thank you for joining us today. Be sure and like, follow, and subscribe. And also check us out at therecoveringpreacherskids.com.